Hello, everyone, and welcome to a late night author interview here on the channel. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today I have a guest from the early years of my podcast days in YouTube era. And this guest was incredible when we first met, and I'm so excited to have him back on the show. And as a little refresher for those who are watching this for the first time, because life's nothing without a good challenge, my guest decided to ditch regular paying jobs to become an author, write on tremendously popular topics like ancient China or samurai fighting zombies, and publish all those nerdy historical fiction novels from Japan. To reserve what's left of his sanity, my guest spends great chunks of time visiting historical sites, bothering his Chinese wife with questions related to her culture she has no answer to, and wrestling with two untirable creatures called children, who he believes have been sent on Earth to test the limits of his previously mentioned sanity. When all of these fail, coffee, whiskey, a fuming bowl of ramen, or an episode of his favorite historical drama, currently Shōgun, do the trick. His novels contain action, grumpy characters, brotherly love, and of course, many blades. They are set in ancient, brutal times where martial skills, stubbornness, and an appetite for trouble guarantee bloody adventures that might shift the future of a realm or two. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest making their second appearance back on the channel, long overdue, Mr. Baptiste Pinson Wu. Baptiste, it is so nice to have you back on the show, my friend.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me back after a year and maybe a few months in between two
Yes.
appearances. So always a pleasure. Thanks, Gabriel.
No problem, Baptiste. So, just as a little refresher and a little introduction, would you like to share with our viewers and listeners what you've been up to since your first appearance on the show a year and a few months ago?
So I think last time we talked, I was promoting my second or third book. Upon your request, I have them here. So the first one was this little baby here, Yellow Sky Revolt,
Mm-hmm.
the first book in a Three Kingdoms Chronicles series. That's a historical fiction set in second, third century China, and revolving around the events of the Three Kingdoms. So one of the bloodiest civil war in human history. I think I was promoting this one probably last time. So
Yes, Heroes of
Heroes
Chaos.
of
Yes.
Chaos. So second book in this series. Since then, I have published book 3 and 4. So 3 Dynasty Killers and 4 Forest of Swords. Now, Forest of Swords is a novella, but people should not skip it. It's still within the main stories. I've had readers telling me like, hey, can I skip this one? Is it because I don't read novellas usually. And I was like, no, this one you have to read, otherwise you will be lost with the next book. So those 4 books from the Three Kingdoms Chronicles are what I consider arc one of this series. There will be 3 arcs altogether. It should be about 12 books. And this is 2 years of writing here. I will restart very soon. I will write the number 5 fairly soon, hopefully to publish it next summer. And then, keep maybe 1 or 2 a year if I can. Not sure. No promises.
Nice. And I
Yeah,
also
yeah, go ahead.
I was just also going to say, and if you follow Baptiste on his social media, you also would know that Baptiste has also delved into other genres, one of which is undead samurai, as well as a retelling of the Norse mythology, Blood of Midgard, and its sequel, uh, Beast of Jotunheimer.
Jotunheim. Yeah.
Jotunheim.
No idea. I have no idea how to pronounce the title of my books. So yeah, absolutely. I wanted to take a small break after writing 4 books on ancient China. So I wrote this one a bit for fun. I wanted to write a book with the zombies. That's a sub genre trope I love. But of course, I wanted it to be set in a very tight historical fiction setting. So if you like historical fiction and you are not big fan of horror or fantasy, I think it should still appeal to you. It's basically an extra asset to historical fiction in this book that is set in early 17th century Japan. So it's right after the events of Shōgun, for example, a bit after, 20 years later. And
Mm.
yeah, like as you mentioned, so my most recent published books are those two. So Blood of Midgard, published August 15, and this one will actually be released on November 12th. Sorry, Beast of Jotunheim, and they are part of a trilogy that is a retelling of Ragnarok, so the end of the world according to Norse mythology. The last one will be released in January, February, so it's a very quickly released trilogy. Now the big twist in this one is that it's a retelling of the end of the world, but from the point of view of human fighting in Odin's army. So if you're a bit
Mm.
familiar with this mythology, you know, the people who died in battle showing bravery would be chosen by Valkyrie to go to Valhalla, where they would fight and feast every day in preparation for the great battle of Ragnarok, right? So those guys are like thousands and thousands of them by the time the battle happens. Well, this is the story told from the point of view of one of them, a leader among them, and
Nice.
basically how he gets tricked by Loki and how he's going to get out of the trap and you know all of this. It's pretty bloody.
Nice. I would expect nothing less, Baptiste, at all. So, for viewers watching this for the very, very first time, when I first met Baptiste and learned about, his style of writing and the stories that he tells, especially with his Three Kingdoms series, instantly we connected. We share exactly the same interests. We love telling historical fiction. We love telling these stories. And ultimately, that's the beautiful thing when it comes to writing is creating stories that resonate with other people who share similar interests. So for Baptiste, as another refresher, would you like to share with our audience sort of like your journey to discovering that writing and telling these incredible stories was something that you wanted to pursue? In other words, your aha moment.
Oh, um, I forgot what I told you last time, so I hope I'm not going to contradict myself. But no, I had several aha moments, and not aha. And I mean, I always wanted to write stories. I always loved telling stories from early childhood. That was part of what I like. But and I became a reader, like a heavy reader from 12, 13 years old. I think I discovered Stephen King, and I was like, man, reading is absolutely amazing. uh, I remember I watched the movie Green Mile, and then my teacher was like, "Oh, you like the movie? How about you read the book?" And I read the book, and I was like, "Fantastic!" I read a lot before that, but not. Maybe there was more comic books or historical documents, these kind of things for fun. And but I started to get into fiction, yeah, from this Green Mile moment. But back then I'm from France, so I was reading French. I was reading a lot of books originally in English, but in French. I couldn't read English yet. And then I think I went to university, and I think that's when I read my first English book without any, bilingual edition or anything like this.
Mhm.
And that was The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, and that was absolutely amazing to realize not only I could read a whole book in English with no like annotations or no need for dictionary or anything, but how powerful this language was in fiction. And so that from then, but from that point, I just read English books all the time and watched TV shows in English and all of this. And I think the big moment that told me, okay, it's time to start writing was reading. I read it's basically a series of books uh, from what the writers that are still my favorite writers. So that would be Bernard Cornwell, Robert Law, and
Mm-hmm.
Giles Christian. So I read those books about Vikings and Dark Ages, and all of them like really gave me this feeling like, oh, it seems impossible, but I want to do this. I want to write books like this. I then from this moment I would watch TV shows and yeah, and like imagine how would I describe this scene? How would I retell this dialogue and all of this? And I think that was in 2017, 18 that I started writing seriously, almost daily, and I haven't stopped since then.
Nice. Now I'm curious, Baptiste. So from your first series, which was the Three Kingdoms series, and still is your primary series, and of course you've dabbled in other genres like zombies, undead, and of course Norse mythology and that sort of discussion. I'm wondering, has your goals of writing changed in the different genres that you've written in? Or has it remained the same?
The goals, you mean, of writing? Um,
Yes.
yeah, not really. I think I don't really care so much about the, we would say, subgenre. I'm gonna write historical fiction. I don't think I will stop. It's always going to be historical settings, even if there is a bit more fiction or mythology. It will
Mm-hmm.
always feel like historical fiction. Even if you read the Blood of Midgard, it's like, of course, you have all the gods and the magic and all of this, but it still feels like you are reading a Viking story. Um, so in that sense, my goal haven't changed, and from the beginning, I really shot for the moon. I'm still aiming to be among the most popular writers in my genre. Now, so where it changed is that with a bit of experience, I understood exactly what spot I wanted in the market,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and for now, even though I'm publishing those Vikings, those Norse books, um, well, I'm really trying to focus on East Asian stories. So I want to be the one writer people think of when they want some Asian setting, East Asian setting. So that might be China or Japan, and I will expand a bit later. So the just for as an explanation, a quick explanation, I wrote those books about Norse mythology 4 years ago. So I wrote them before the Three Kingdoms, before the Undead Samurai, and all of this. And so I wanted to publish them, but I am mostly going to focus on China and Japan for now because those are the two cultures and countries I know best. Uh,
Okay.
so I would say that that's the only difference between when I started publishing and now is that, okay, now I know where I want to focus, at least for the next 10 years. Um, Most of what I will write is going to be set in, uh, yeah, those settings that could be very ancient history, a bit more modern history, but it's always going to be in the past and within those two countries or cultures.
All right. Now, regarding reviews and feedback for the numerous books you've written, have they remained the same, or is it positive in one set of books and mixed or not positive for the other ones, or has it been generally, the same kind of reactions in all of your books?
No, I think the reviews and ratings are fairly similar. Yellow Sky Revolt, my debut, has a bit of a lower rating. I think it's 4.2 or 3, depending if you check Goodreads or Amazon. And but the big difference is in the quantity. So for the last two books that I published, the Norse retelling, for example, I didn't really push for them too hard, so I didn't send many ARC copies. I didn't promote it because I want the trilogy to be complete before I start promoting them. So there are very few reviews, but Yellow Sky Revolt has a little bit over 100, Undead Samurai pretty much too. So it's going steadily, not as fast as I would love, but it's still going steadily, and the ratings are very good. So I'm really pleased of the way it's going so far. in terms of reviews and feedbacks and all of this. This being said, so my most the project I finished the most recently is something very different from what I did so far, because it's more young adult targeted, and it's more
Okay.
so it's a bit of a different kind of story. It's still set in a Japanese culture in Japan, in a mythological Japan, we would say, but it's more for YA audience, and the feedbacks the feedback I received was sometimes a bit mixed, because my readers who love the adult feeling of my regular books might have been a little bit disappointed. But then when I send it to new readers that didn't really know my books, they seem to love it. So I'm really excited to see what's the real feedback.
Right.
What will be the reception to this book? Yeah.
Nice. And we'll actually be talking about that a little bit later in the interview. But I think now this actually perfectly segues to another question, and one I don't think I asked you the first time we met. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts. So, after writing, the 4 books in the first part of your Three Kingdoms Chronicles, and then going into a different book, which is a different genre, and then 2 other books for another genre, it is kind of, a little bit of a challenge, a good challenge to see, okay, can I test myself to see if I can write something different from what people expect? And of course, that does bring up the discussion of, is it going to be well received? Because as you mentioned, that you want to be known as the author who writes these incredible stories set in East Asia. And that'll be discussed later in another topic in the interview. But before I get to that, coming back to this question, there is sort of like this level of like anxiety or hesitancy to sort of go outside of one's comfort zone when it comes to writing. When it comes to, if you write historical fiction but want to go into fantasy, you're like, I don't know how to write good fantasy. So you may do like historical fantasy, which is still fantasy nonetheless, but still most people may, expect you to only write in one genre. And then going back to this nervousness, this anxiety, and maybe also imposter syndrome, which is very present for all of us authors. I'm just curious, Baptiste. So when you decide to take a break from your Three Kingdoms series, what disciplined you and challenged you to make Undead Samurai and the 2 books in your Norse mythology trilogy?
Well, first, there is no such thing as a comfort zone in writing. So
Yes.
uh, even if there is something that I know better because of experience, it's never a comfort. And historical fiction is, in many ways, the least comfortable genre you could imagine, because so many people know those historical settings better than
Yes.
you as a writer. And when you get their feedbacks, and it's it's a heavy moment, when you're like, okay, that's very good, but that's not how they would have stitched that armor. Like, and then
Mm-hmm.
so you have those moments when you realize historical fiction is probably one of the most difficult genres to write in. And in this regard, everything else is actually a little bit more comfortable. So for example, in Undead Samurai, even though I tried very hard to keep it historically accurate, I didn't mind uh, changing a few things or making things a little bit easier, because that never happened. So
Right.
if, for example, they would call the country Japan in this book, like, oh, we need to save Japan. The notion of Japan didn't really exist the same back then. But I don't want to bother the reader with calling Japan or the 8 islands, or some other name they would have given this place at that time.
Right.
So in that sense, I wouldn't say it's easy to write anything but historical fiction, not at all. But it's a bit more spacious. You have a bit more comfort around you as you write those this kind of stories. Same with the Norse mythology. So I researched as much as I felt comfortable to write something accurate. But at the end of the day, that is a culture that we know very little for sure about. and most of what we know of this culture came from secondary sources written 200 or 300 years later by people from another
Mhm.
religion, so people with an agenda. So I use this as an excuse to basically write what I want. And
Mhm.
I met some experts in the field of Vikings, North mythology, and all of this, and they told me the same thing. Is like, yeah, don't worry, we know nothing for sure. So what we know for sure, try to stick to it, but don't worry too much. It's up to interpretation. But they were saying like, don't. However, we know the names, all right? The names we are sure how they were pronounced, how they were
Right.
used, and all of this. So they were like, don't screw it up. And unfortunately, yeah, I did. I really messed up with the names. I played with them, but that's fine. Um, so yeah, I don't think. Like I said, there is no comfort zone. Everything is fairly tricky, but very enjoyable. And I don't really see a big difference between the genre in those books. Like
Mm.
I said, the kind of setting is fairly similar. So I hope the readers will not feel such a big difference between my books from one to another in terms of experience. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair. And since you just brought up readership again, that'll be another big question in the next segment, which actually we are arriving into now, which is the business side of being an author. And I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on this, Baptiste. So, as a refresher again to myself, you went down the road, if I remember correctly from our first interaction, you went down the road of an indie author, correct?
Well, to begin with, I tried traditional publishing. So I queried my first book or two to agents. I found an agent after a year and a half or something, and then while this agent was shipping my book to different publishers, well, that gave me time to actually write this North retelling trilogy. And nothing much was happening. So I never received a lot of feedback from publishers. I didn't. It wasn't moving as fast as I had hoped or wanted. So I decided after 1 year and a few months to that's okay. I'll self-publish. I'm too impatient
Mhm.
for this, and I had all those books that waited to be published, and so I went self-publishing quite fast, to be honest.
Nice. And looking back from that decision, and with everything you've learned about the industry thus far with your books, would you have gone the self-publishing route again, or would you tried your hand at traditional publishing again, or even hybrid publishing?
Now, I think if I knew all I know now, I would have gone self-publishing earlier. I wouldn't have tried the traditional route, and yeah, I think I would have directly studied how to self-publish and how to self-publish and everything. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. That's fair. And now we turn to the audience because, as I said and say in numerous episodes, my viewers and listeners, the audience is important. Yes, we are the target audience in